Okay, I think this is our TTP first training section on education skills. Let's welcome Professor Duff.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. How are you doing at this potentially stressful time of the semester? Doing all right? Yeah, good luck. If it's any consolation, we professors feel it too. It's probably no consolation. Anyway. So I am Dr. Duff. I used to be a high school math teacher, and I now work in teacher education here at Cornell. What I was asked to do today is to provide some guidelines for how to plan a lesson, and then once it's planned, how to teach it. Let's start by finding out what you know, or what you think you know, about this adventure that you're going to have this summer. And the way we'll find out is I'll ask some questions, and I will write your answers on the board. So the first question is, what do you know about the students that you'll be working with? Now that's a very big, broad question. I'm going to break it down into smaller questions to help get us started. Yeah, and that, can you pretend that this didn't show up? Just pretend. All right. So what, if anything, do you know about the age or grade levels of the students that you'll work with?
Elementary school.
Okay, that's my understanding. And that's called primary school in China, is that right?
9th grade.
What's that?
9th grade, mostly.
Oh, so this is not correct?
Yeah.
So they've been misinformed?
Just, I think most of I talked about it in the interview. You have a good idea about your teaching middle school students, right? Yeah, most of them do, yeah.
So can I cross this off?
Yeah.
Just kidding. So we'll say early high school students. Okay. Is that true for all of your teachers?
Right.
None of them will be working with the younger kids?
They're just teaching early high school level and adult teachers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just remind you what we're doing. We're taking this big question of what do you know about the students that you're going to teach, and we're unpacking it into smaller questions. So the next one is, what, if anything, do you know or think you know about how your students are accustomed to learning in school? What style of teaching, what style of learning do you think they're used to? What are some words that come to mind? Yeah.
I think it would be memorization.
What else, if anything, would you imagine they're used to?
Lots of practice, like problems, worksheets. I would imagine it's lecture-based.
Farron, I have this memory, but it might have been a conversation with someone else.
Yeah.
There's a metaphor that they use. What's the metaphor that they use in China to describe this?
Lecture-based, memorization-based, aiming at exams. We have a term called...
It was like stuffing the duck or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Stuffing the duck. Have y'all heard of that? Could you explain that? Stuffing the duck?
It's called 填鸭教学 in Chinese. It means when you're cooking some kind of Chinese cuisine, mostly what you're going to do is you take out what's inside its belly and you fill it with rice or vegetables and or potatoes or something else you'd like to cook it with the duck. And now, whatever you want to put in, it's everything. So, teacher in China, they teach the students and full the knowledge into them, just like filling in the dark. They don't teach them based on understanding, they just force them to memorize whatever is in their mind.
And so the duck does not have much say in the matter, does he?
No.
No. Let's see, my remote. Any other words come to mind? I think that duck metaphor nicely captures everything that's been said here so far. Okay. I think one of the questions you have to ask about the students that you work with is, what do they know? What are the references that they will understand? What kinds of TV do they watch? What kinds of books do they read? What do they do for fun? Because nothing feels worse as a teacher than making a joke that no one gets, or saying, remember that time you did this, and no one remembers because they never did this, right? So you have to know, I think to teach them well, you have to know what they can relate to, what references will resonate for them. Now that's tricky. How are you going to find out over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks before you go to China? How will you find out what they can relate to, what they're used to seeing? Do you have any way, any resources that you can use for that?
They'll have a culture crash course tomorrow.
So, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So they'll get a crash course tomorrow. What else?
On basic knowledge of Chinese education bureaucracy, and so we give them a basic idea of how Chinese education is mainly exam-based. Even in the primary levels education, what they mostly do is they have the exams from a very early age, and their very motivation is to get a better grade instead of being creative and learning things because they want to.
But I wonder if, in this crash course on Chinese culture, you guys will find out, well, here's an example. If I'm talking to a middle school audience here in the United States, I can mention the Hunger Games, and most of them will at least have heard of it, and many of them will know kind of what it's about. So I can say that, and the reference won't fall flat. I can talk about Harry Potter, right? I have no idea whether those references would go over with the students there. So, assuming that you won't get everything you need from the crash course, what else could you do before you get over to China to find out what they know? What they do for fun? Jess?
The internet. Like
The
you can
internet.
do research
They could.
through like typing into Google. That's like the fastest.
Sure. Google, the all-knowing oracle, right? You
Or,
could start there.
You could talk to Feiran a little bit. She has some experience.
What else could you do? Be bold. Be bold.
You call relatives if you have any in China.
You could call your own relatives. That's a really good idea. Is there someone in China that you guys are working closely with, someone who kind of anchors things on their end?
They will have a team lead in every teaching base they go to,
Okay.
and they will be put in contact at least 2 months ahead of time.
Okay, would it be possible to contact that person
Yeah.
and say, we want to find out what kinds of books kids are reading, what kinds of video games they're playing, what they do in their free time, right? Because we think that will help us teach them better, and it will.
The team lead will probably give you a better idea how that school is like specifically.
Okay. I think one other thing you want to know about your students before you go there is what kind of resources they will have access to both at school and in their homes. Because, just imagine you get them all excited about something, but it requires a computer in the home. And many of them don't have a computer in the home. That would kind of stink, right? Get their hopes up about something, but then they can't really follow it up on their own. So I think you want to find out what kind of homes do they go home to. And I have no idea whether there'd be a lot of variation. You said that most of these kids come from farming families, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that means that generally they're unlikely to have computers in the home?
I think it actually varies depending on where exactly they're going to. But I think they will have basic and huge bulky computers and not so fast internet.
Okay, and they won't have smartphones?
Definitely not.
Definitely not have smartphones, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another good thing to know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in a nutshell, what I'm encouraging you to do is do your homework. In other words, do work while you're here at home so that you know as much about those kids as you possibly can. And here's the reason for that. One of the things that we know about learning is people learn best when they're able to connect new material, the stuff you want them to learn, with stuff they already know. Another way of putting that, start where the students are and take them someplace they haven't been. And do you see the connection between this principle and doing your homework before you arrive? Because you can't start where they are unless you know where they are, right? And you can't know where they are unless you ask questions and find out what they read, what they eat, what they like, what they don't like, what kind of music they listen to. And it's not about pandering to students. It's about starting where they are and taking them somewhere that they haven't been yet. I think that's what teachers do. Okay, before I go on, questions about anything? Okay. I think this is the second important question that you have to ask and answer before you get to China. What is your job when you're with students? So what is it? What do you think your job is? Yeah.
To be a mentor.
What does that mean?
In my interpretation, it's like you're someone who comes from a different background that can introduce them to a new perspective. Yet but different from their teachers, because like your age gap won't be that drastic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like midway between friend and teacher.
Yeah. So Jess suggested that part of being a mentor is exposing students to new perspectives they would be unlikely to get from mom and dad, and also from their teachers. Yeah. Yes?
New perspectives, also as in like middle school or high school education is not as far as it can go. It's possible to get even more, and like go to college and do more things and find out more about the world.
Okay. Tell me if I haven't captured what you meant, but so a mentor should not only expose students to new perspectives, new ways of looking at the world, but also a new sense of possibility, like, yeah, you can do this. What else? What else is part of your job?
I think this is adding on to kind of being able to identify with them and really connect on like a more intimate level.
I'm trying to figure out a way to write that so it doesn't take up too much board space, but really kind of capture the essence of what you said. So if you come up with an idea before I do, shout it out. How would you capture the essence of what she said?
Forging intimate relationships.
Okay. I underline that word because I have an association with it, or I have a couple of questions about it. You guys are going to be in country 10 to 14 days, is that right? So roughly 2 weeks. Is that enough time to have a truly intimate, close relationship with students? Or maybe I'm not thinking about it. Maybe you guys actually will stay in touch with them once you leave. Is that possible?
We do have a follow-up program of being in contact with the students in forms of email and keep track of like how the teachers you taught, like how's their follow-up studying going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, when I think of intimate, I think beyond the academic. Is there going to be time in your day to actually sit down with the kids and talk about non-academic stuff?
Yes, as a mentor, as a friend.
Oh, good.
Right.
Good, okay. Anything else that you think we should add to the list of what your job is? Are you supposed to inform them, like teach them information? Is that part of your job? Teach them information? I'll just say inform. What if I told you that this is your only job? How would you feel? Would you be like, I want my money back? I don't want to go anymore?
I feel very constricted.
Yeah. So you really want to be able to do these other things?
Yeah. That's why I'm passionate about the program.
Yeah. How about inspire? Do you think that's part of your job? And is it redundant? If I write inspire, is it like, well, we've already talked about that because it really goes here? Maybe. So, doing these things takes time, which leads me to the next question. And it's a genuine question. I don't know the answer. We may have talked about it just in terms, but I don't recall. How much time will you have with any given class? So if we imagine a group of 20 students. How many times will you see that group of kids? Every day?
The kids will not be in school for that long. I think about a week's time that they'll go home first, and then we'll have a standard teaching strict schedule for teaching and training the teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And besides that, you will be designing your own curriculum to lecture on the topic of your choice to the students.
to the students, but what is your name?
May.
May. So if we imagine May planning a curriculum on, what's something you like?
Literature.
Okay. May is planning a lesson on literature. Right? She'll get to teach that lesson multiple times, right? Okay. But if we imagine this class right here, 20 students, right? Will May only see that group of kids once?
She'll probably only lecture them once or twice.
So twice at the most?
Right.
Okay. And how long would May's workshop lecture be? Would she see them for 45 minutes, an hour and a half?
Each lecture is 40 minutes.
40 minutes. I think this is important to know, right? Because look at this list of goals, this list of things that you want to be for the students, and think about how little time you're actually going to have with them if I understand the program. It's not much time. Now, I asked earlier if your teachers would have a chance, your volunteers would have a chance to just talk one-on-one with kids.
Yeah, it's part of the program.
Okay. So they won't get a whole lot of teaching time, but there will be some extra time where they get to talk?
Right, there should also be scheduled field trips with the students. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so they don't have to get it all done in a lecture.
Hopefully.
They'll have other opportunities to mentor, inform, and inspire.
Right.
I see. But those other opportunities will be less planned, more
Right.
spontaneous, more flexible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of field trips are you likely to take?
I think the team leads gets to decide. They have
Decide.
flexibility. It's not a very hard schedule that I would know ahead of time.
Okay. The reason I ask is when I think about this goal of broadening students' perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
getting them outside their village or their bubble,
Mm-hmm.
this would seem like a great opportunity to do that, but I don't know where they're going. I don't know how far off their campus they're likely to go. You're not sure?
I think a better way of bringing new perspective to the students might be because we're all pretty educated college students. Most of us has a definite major that we're going to commit to,
Right.
and we have a certain level of proficiency with that. I think we can ask the volunteer teachers to talk about what kind of new perspective they want to instill in the students, and also what kind of curriculum or topic of interest do they have in mind.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's bringing the new perspective to them rather than taking them to a new perspective
Right.
necessarily. Okay. Let's talk about what you can do in your 40-minute workshop or lecture to at least have a fighting chance of doing one or more of these things. I think most likely, in the course of a 40-minute lecture, you can do these two things. And you'd be pretty awesome if you did those two things in 40 minutes. I would want to take lessons from you if you managed to do that. So let's talk a little bit about how you can do that. Right. If you use technology, make sure the batteries work. Everything's charged and ready to go. Like I didn't. I'm having a little trouble here. All right. When you're talking to a group of people, whether it's for 40 minutes or 2 hours, you have a couple of things you have to do at a minimum. You have to get their attention, and you have to keep it. And they're not the same thing. And I think there are different strategies you can use to get it and then to keep it. Let's talk about some of those strategies. I'm guessing you have some good teachers here at Cornell, or maybe you had some really good ones in high school. Can you think of ways that they got your attention? So imagine you're in the hallway and you're talking with your friends about what you did over the weekend, and then you enter the classroom. And some teachers are really, really good at pulling you from that social realm of the hallway into the academic realm of the classroom. And some really stink at it, right? So think about the ones who did it really well. How did they get your attention? What are some things that they did?
Demos.
Yeah, that's a great example. You can get people's attention through a demonstration of some kind. I think very often demos have the element of surprise, right? When someone is surprised by something, what goes through their mind, even if they won't admit it?
Interesting.
Yeah, like, why did that happen? That's not what I expected. So even your most hardened, jaded, cynical student will be thinking that, even if they're looking at you like you have three heads. Right? So a demo would be a great way to start. What are some other ways that good teachers you've had get people's attention?
Jokes?
You could use a joke. So humor?
Yeah.
You could. Though I'm going to put, is there a symbol for caution? A universal symbol for caution? I don't have yellow chalk. I guess I'll just put, sometimes that can be interpreted as be careful. There actually have been studies on what students remember about lectures, and very often it's the joke that has nothing to do with the content. So you don't want to use humor that has nothing to do, that has no insight, no connection to the material, because students will remember it, and they'll be whispering in the back of the classroom, oh, that was really funny, right? So I guess just use humor cautiously. How else can you get people's attention? Yes?
You make it relevant to their own lives.
Wonderful. I talked earlier about the Hunger Games. So if I were speaking to a middle school audience, depending on the topic, I might say, you know how Katniss in the Hunger Games did this? And I'd pause and let them recall. And if they hadn't read the book, they could turn to a neighbor and say, what? Right? So start with something that they know that's relevant to them, that they can connect with. Or something like this. How many of you have had the experience of asking your parents to stay up late, and they say no? And most people can relate to that experience, right? So asking a question like, how many of you have done this? Have you ever felt like that? Those things immediately pull students into a lesson. So I want you to notice something. I think it's kind of interesting. These two are really at heart about novelty. So one way to get attention is to do something unexpected, something novel. But another way to get people's attention is to start with the familiar. So if you think about it, when you teach somebody, when you're doing a lesson, it's this constant interplay between new and old, new and old. If it was all new, that would be very confusing because you'd have nothing to attach it to. So think of a lesson as an interplay between new and old. Very nicely done. I'm going to move on to the second part of this. How do you keep attention? something I remembered. Stories. Starting a lesson with a story. People like stories. There's something about the way stories are constructed. They tend to have characters, they have some conflict, the conflict gets resolved, right? People tend to find that very satisfying, even if they won't tell you that. So stories can get attention. Now, how do you keep attention? It's not the same thing. Let me put one up and see if you think it's right. I want you to imagine a lecture that is just a steady diet of novelty, of newness. Have you ever been in a lecture where it's like, oh my gosh, you just moved on to something else and I still don't get what was back here? So is it fair to say that a steady diet of novelty would probably not be a great way to keep attention, because it's, at a certain point you'd shut down, right? So I would say this is generally not effective in keeping attention. But is there something over there that probably would be effective in keeping attention?
Relevance?
I think so, yeah. You know, I was a high school math teacher, and so I can't tell you how many times I heard students say, when am I ever going to do this? Right? When am I ever going to use a trigonometric identity? And I think in my first couple of years of teaching, I gave a really, really weak, lame answer to that. I said, trust me, you'll need it in college. Pretty weak, right? So I would argue that if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be teaching it. If you can't legitimately say to students, well, let me walk you through how I think it would be important in a way that's believable, maybe you should try teaching something else. And if you think about it, you guys have a luxury that I didn't have. I had to teach trigonometric identities because it was going to be on the SAT 2, and if my students didn't do well on the SAT 2, I was in trouble. And they were in trouble. You guys don't have that to worry about, do you? I envy you. Now I will say, and I hope Farron and Jess, you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the problem of relevance is especially high in Western cultures because students are used to being very independent. They're quite comfortable saying, what's the point? I would imagine that you're less likely to get that kind of question from the students that you'll be with. Is that a fair assumption? Yeah? But I still think it's a good idea to plan as if they will ask you, what's the point of this? Because they might be thinking it even if they don't say it. Any other thoughts about how to keep attention?
Enthusiasm?
That's a good one. How do you show enthusiasm? Like, what are the signs, the outward signs of it?
Smiling and
Smile.
then gestures.
Gestures. Yeah. Is it possible to be too enthusiastic? To be so over the top?
Yeah, that the students are a little scared of you or
Yes.
like weirded out.
That's right. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining that the style of instruction that they're used to is fairly low-key. I'm guessing that their teachers don't do backflips and cartwheels very often, right? So you have to be careful not to be over the top. Here's a really important one that people don't think about. If you want to keep students' attention, you've got to make them feel smart. You have to make them feel like they have self-efficacy, a sense of confidence, a sense of competence. I can do this. What do you think students do if they're sitting in class and the teacher is going so fast that they just can't catch up and they start to feel dumb? What are different ways to respond to that feeling dumb? How might a student respond to that? So I'm feeling really dumb. I feel like everybody else gets it and I don't get it. So what might I do? Yeah.
You probably just shut down and stop listening.
I could shut down. And I might maintain, I might, look straight ahead. I might look like I'm engaged, right? But it's sort of an empty stare. What else might a student do, especially in America?
Pull up the iPhone.
Oh, sure. Pull out something that I am the master of, right? I'm a master of texting, or I'm a master of the iPhone. What else might students do when they're feeling dumb?
Put your head down.
You could. Put your head down. Now, it's interesting to ask this question of Cornell students because I'm sure you guys never did things like this, but what you often get is acting out. You distract people around you because it's far better to be the class clown than to be the class idiot. Right? So very often students who act out in class are acting out because they don't get it and they don't like feeling stupid. So they'd rather have people laugh with them, right? Because at least that gives them a sense of power. I can make people laugh. I don't understand what Mr. Duff's saying, but I can make him laugh. Now again, I'm guessing that acting out is probably less of a problem in the schools that you guys will be in,
You never know.
but it could still be a problem, an issue. So the point is, you want students to feel smart, competent, and there are things you can do, genuine things. Don't just tell students, oh, you're so smart, because they'll see right through it, right? One of the ways that you help students feel smart goes back to something we talked about before. Start with what they know. Start with what they know. Here's a way to make students feel smart that we don't often think about. Right, I'm trying not to use a whole lot of jargon, but this is one I just can't help myself. And once you break it down, I will explain what it is. Have all of you taken big science lectures? No, some of you have not. Okay. I think this question will make the most sense to those who have, but it may still make sense. Have you ever done clicker quizzes? Okay. So tell me if they went like this. 10 minutes into a lecture, the professor stops and puts a question up. And the question is meant to sort of figure out, okay, are they with me? Or does some critical mass of the class not get it? And if some critical mass doesn't get it, I need to reteach it. Is that how your clicker quizzes worked? Yes? Kind of? It really stinks, right, when a professor does these clicker quizzes, half the class doesn't get it, and they just plow right on, right? That's not cool. But formative assessment is when you stop periodically and ask a question to see if students are getting it. It's not waiting until the end when it's too late. But it's stopping every once in a while, asking a question or two to see if students are with you. And if they're not, do something about it before they get hopelessly lost. Now you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, is that fair to the half of the class that does get it? Is it really fair to make the class that gets it the first time sit through another explanation? Well, depends. How might you solve that problem? If you're teaching a class, you ask a question, half the class gets it right, half gets it wrong. What might you do to keep those guys who got it, guys and girls, who got it right the first time, from getting bored?
You could ask them to explain it to the people who
Awesome.
didn't
You
get
could
it.
do that. Now, if you did that every single time, the students who get it would get a little tired. Like, you know what, I'm paying to learn from you, professor. I'm not paying to be the teacher. But I think used periodically, it's okay. Now here's one way, here's a really common way to do formative assessment. Imagine I've just spoken for 10 minutes, and I stop and say, any questions? Okay, let's keep going. Don't do that. Do you realize how pointless that is? It is the rare student who will say, Professor, I don't get it. Not going to happen very often. But chances are a lot of people are confused. So if instead you get to a certain point, you're like, you know what, I got to stop and check and make sure people are with me. You put a question up. How could you make sure that everybody answers it, not just the one who volunteers? What are some things you could do, low-tech things you could do to make sure that everybody answers a question? Because here's another thing that happens all the time. Any questions? No? Okay. We'll try this one. When was the War of 1812 fought? Raise your hand, Jess. Jess? 1812, right. So that taking of the first hand that goes up is also a terrible way to do formative assessment. Because chances are the ones who really don't know are not going to raise their hand. Right? So what are some things you can do as a teacher to test everybody at the same time? Have everybody answer the question and get a read on whether you got to go over again or move on. There's some things you could do. Yeah.
Have the answers written on the board and like have kids vote for them.
Sure. So and how would they vote? Like by raising their hand? All those in favor of option A?
Well, like for raising hands, some students might just look around them.
That's right.
So like maybe have them walk up and mark or something, or I don't know.
Okay. I guess if you had a small class, that might be okay. But then you also might watch your smart friend go up and mark A, and then you would just follow suit.
Yeah.
Even though you don't really get it. So I like it. I think there might be some better ways to do it. So we want everyone to answer. You want to get a read, Jess?
I don't know, like, I remember when I was in school, like, my teachers, they would, like, make everyone close their eyes, and then, like, they would have different options.
Yeah.
And, like, then, like, said, if you think it's option A, you raise your hand.
Yeah.
And, like, that way you don't know what other people around you put, but, like, the teacher knows what you think the answer is.
Exactly. That's great. That's great. Or, if you don't want to have them close their eyes, you could say, up on the board is a question. It's got choice 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want you to think about it. And when you think you know your answer, just hold up the number of fingers that correspond to your answer. And hold it close to your chest so no one else can see it. And then I can really quickly just look out and see, okay, 3/4 of the class gets it, right? Do you guys have a budget for supplies? Because there's something else you might be able to do.
For prizes?
No, supplies.
I'm not sure.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, because there are these little like whiteboards. They're mini whiteboards, and you can give each student one and ask a question.